あ、わかった。にゃーん、ゴロにゃーん。
Hello everyone and welcome to Otaku Go here on the Gunpla network. As you can tell, we're taking a look at the version 2 Black Hanekawa from Sega after we took a look at the version 1. This one is sporting a more casual look than PJs with some jeans, a t-shirt, and a button-up shirt over that, and it's quite nice. But let's take a look at the box. The box is pretty similar to the version 1 in terms of its visual stylings, but it is a much thinner or narrower box, I suppose. Feels a little taller, but I think they're actually the same height. It is mostly, I think, due to the hair on the version 1 being so big and a little bit heavier that it had to be a little more substantial in terms of boxing, but not as wide, has the same visual style, so if you decide to use this as a riser or display it alongside your figurines, it's still going to have that Monogatari vibe that is well known for in terms of its visual style. You can also tell this box came a little banged up. I don't really know if that's something that was kind of already done. The box, when it arrived, did have some denting in it, so I think it's probably that. But at least it hasn't really damaged the box too significantly or affected the figurine. So it's at least something to note if boxes are a big thing for you. Now, the figurine itself is pretty different from the version 1. Even the face sculpt, being fairly similar, is a little different and doesn't feel as flat as the first version did. You, of course, are losing the big long hair in favor of the short hair, which makes this quite a bit lighter in terms of its actual heft. I do actually like this design more visually speaking, but it is something that is a real personal preference out of the several versions of Black Hanekawa that exist. The jean t-shirt combination's nice. I always appreciate that in anime. It's always like a school uniform or something, but it's nice when you get some more casual clothing or any kind of different fashion in an anime, and this is a good example of that. The overall styling and sculpt of the shirt and the pants is great. You get some more shading down on the jeans. You get more flowing, ripply patterns on the shirt as it's kind of flowing, which is cool. And overall, honestly, pretty on point. I will say I love the two little Neko teeth on this one. I think that's so cool. It's a small little detail, but it's nice that it's there. Overall, I think this is my favorite of the designs, but I think this one came in a little more scuffed up, which wasn't due to the box damage. It's just there's some scuffs on the paint here and there. And some of them are a little bit more noticeable. You probably see at least one on the legs, but the other ones are mostly in the hair and they blend in a lot better. So unless you're really going over this with a fine-tooth comb, you're probably not going to notice. I will say, and it's hard to see in some of these shots, but the hair also has like a pink hue towards the end, but only in the back and not on the front. A little strange, but I think it is a nice way to compensate for the lack of the big, long, very infamous looking Neko hair from the first version of Burakku Hanekawa. I like the pose a little bit more as well. It's a little actiony, more jovial, a little bit funner, and that's also reflected in the face. Overall, I feel like proportionally this is much better done than the first version. The hands don't feel too crazy or elongated, and none of the skin seems overly plastic, which is nice. Sure, the kind of difference in texture or finish kind of helped distinguish parts of the first version, but I do like the kind of general cohesiveness of this. You do get a little bit of that plastic shine on the chest mostly, but since it's not as prominent, I suppose, it's not as noticeable, and you really have to blast it with light to really show off that kind of shimmer or shine. Overall, I think this is my favorite of the two, though. I just love the casual look, and for the most part, the jeans and the shirt and everything are done pretty well. You do have some weird finish on the jeans that some parts look dusty, but I can assure you it's not dust. I've tried to remove it and it won't come off, so take with that as you will. It's not all over the jeans, so I'm not sure if maybe it's a defect or something, but you will notice it here and there. The shirt is nice, the undershirt is nice. It's overall a pretty pleasant figurine to look at. Now the head is probably, I'd say, the probably closest in terms of similarity to the original version, or the first version. The eyes are very similar, the hair is pretty similar, but you do have that different mouth, and like I said, it doesn't feel as flat, which is either because the nose is elongated, or it's just the pose lends itself more to looking less flat, because it is a pretty regular pose. It's not all JoJo-ified, if you will. You see some of the pink hueing down here on the hair in the back. Kind of weird it didn't carry to the front, but it's really not so noticeable because it's pretty subtle. You do have some scuffs and stuff in the hair, but like I said, they blend in pretty well, so you're really not going to notice that too much. I do think this is the better face sculpt, though. I love the little Neko teeth, I love the open mouth, it just feels funner and is my personal preference, of course. I don't think this is any better in terms of its sculpt or paintwork. It's just I like the kind of funner vibe that this one gives off. I will say that because of the hair and the pose and the way it's looking, you may have some issues with lighting as far as like a lot of shade is going to be on one side of the face. But if you're not filming a review and it's on your shelf, I don't think you're really going to notice. But if you do like to have equal lighting, you're going to have to work with it a little bit. So just kind of keep that in mind. If you do want the dramatic look though, the way this is designed works really well because you're going to get a lot of shade on one side of the face. So it is going to be pretty stark in contrast, if you will. But we'll give you one little final twirl here and kind of an appreciation of the head and the face sculpt. Now as we move down, of course, the next thing we come to are the... And they're a little bit less obvious than they were the first time, but they're still quite big. The shirts do help kind of cover them and cover some of that plasticky looking skin, and overall make it less of a significant feature, which isn't bad. It just doesn't feel as disproportionate. It feels like it flows into the figure versus it being like the third thing you look at or the second thing you look at outside of the big Neko hair on the first version. Now, as you can tell, the pose, she's almost been to like a 90-degree angle, not quite, but pretty close. And overall, it works pretty well. I mean, everything kind of flows into it. The chest doesn't feel too out of place. The shirt kind of does have some tension there in between. And it's generally speaking a pretty good overall look. You do get some of that plasticky skin, like I said, but there's so much less of it popping out that you're really not going to notice it unless it's being lit top down or kind of at an angle directly at it. You do, however, see a little bit more obvious part separation there in the seams between the shirt and the chest, but just kind of something to think about. As we continue to move down, we get to see the waist and, of course, the butt. Do she got the booty? She do. One thing I do dislike about this, though, is they didn't put the seam of the pants in the same place that the connection between the two legs is, which is really irritating because it looks really strange if you're like just staring at that. And for a review, unfortunately, I have to. And it's just kind of strange, but overall, the jeans themselves look great. The belt kind of sticking out a little bit is kind of nice too. You do get to see some of that weird dusty finish here and there. Like I said, I've tried and it will not come off, so I think it's maybe something with the paint or the finish, but it is something to kind of notice. You do see some of the smudges in these closer up shots, but if you're not looking at this detailed, you're not going to notice. But yeah, see, that seam is just not in the same spot where they connect in that like part separation line, or that seam line, if you will. Just looks really strange. But oddly enough, I don't think most people are going to be just staring at this figure from behind, at least hopefully not for long. In terms of the shading on the pants, though, you do see it significantly more around the leg that is bent, and you see the foot there being not very plasticky looking, which is good. This overall, I feel like, is kind of an advancement, but this individual particular unit maybe just had a couple of scuffs here and there that makes it stand out a little bit more. in kind of a negative light. But generally speaking, I do quite like this version more. The jeans are well done, even with the scuffs. The shading on them is pretty subtle, but pretty noticeable. The weird seam line in the crotch is weird, but, you know, not really going to be staring at it if it's on your shelf in that location. And then the other foot kind of being articulated or gestated kind of up and not having that really super glossy shiny sheen on it looks pretty good. If you're looking at it from a shelf that's a little bit higher, this is kind of the view you're gonna get. And overall, I mean, it looks good from most angles. You're not gonna have any issues as far as like you really have to specifically orient it a certain way on a certain shelf. It's a pretty standard price figure, so pop it wherever you want. As long as you're not like zooming in on it with a magnifying glass, you're probably gonna be pretty pleased. Now, this is the same outfit that another figurine that has the whole banana chair. She has both that in that figurine and this one. She has the same outfit on. Of course, the banana chair one is kind of cool to look at, but I do actually quite like this. It gives the attention to this kind of very casual outfit and this very jovial look that I don't think the other one has. Out of the two, this is definitely my favorite, mostly just because she looks happier. The outfit is very casual and just like something people would wear instead of the pajamas, which are fairly iconic or tied to the idea of Black Hanekawa. But generally speaking, I always like when any kind of extra media comes out with characters in just casual or more fashionable clothing like this. Yes, I know she wears this in the series, but just this concept is really cool. I love to see it, and I love to see it here. So overall, I do prefer this one over version 1, but that is a personal preference. In terms of its sculpt quality, its paint work, and its overall just vibe, they're pretty similar. The hair on the other one is heftier, gives the figure a little bit more weight to it, and is of course a little bit more eye-catching, but this one is going to be a little less serious looking, a little more playful, a little happier looking, and kind of stand out just because she is in casual clothing, because let's face it, most anime figurines, with maybe a few exceptions for Eva figures, are not in just regular clothing. They're in some uniform or some suit or something of that nature. So that's just my personal preference. If you have any questions for us, pop them in the comments down below. Danik and I will try to answer them our best. Of course, if you have any questions about how Danik went about getting these from Nanoma, or what Nanoma is, or any site recommendations, we'll also be happy to help provide some. But outside of that, that has been it for this episode of Otaku Go. I'm the Spicer, and as always, friends, please stay safe and keep on collecting.